Good afternoon, doctor. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Just be sure to speak up, get close to the microphone, sir.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you.
Okay. Tell us your name, please.
My name is Dr. Lisa Hutchison, MD.
And currently right now, where are you?
I am in a suburb of Kansas City.
And is that where you're employed?
Yes, sir.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a pediatric radiologist.
Okay. And if you don't mind, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please, your educational background and how you came to obtain that position.
Yes, sir. I went to high school and obtained a diploma. After that, I spent 4 years at the University of Tennessee and obtained my undergraduate degree. And then I went to medical school in Nashville at Meharry Medical College for 4 years and got my medical degree. After that, I went to Wake Forest University, North Carolina Baptist Hospital, and completed my general diagnostic radiology training. That is a 5-year training program. After that, I went to National Children's Medical Center, George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where I spent an extra year doing pediatric radiology.
And are you currently board certified?
Yes, sir. I passed all of my boards on my first attempt, and I've been board certified since the 1995. It's continuous and is currently up to date.
And you are board certified in what?
I am board certified in diagnostic radiology with a certificate of added qualification in pediatric radiology.
And are you licensed to practice medicine?
Yes, sir.
In what states?
Kansas and Missouri.
What is the American Board of Radiology?
The American Board of Radiology is the organization that you go through in order to get your board exams and become a board certified practicing radiologist.
And do you currently have any involvement with that organization?
Yes, sir. For over 20 years, I've been a volunteer with that organization. I was in charge for over a decade of actually organizing the pediatric radiology portion of that exam for all general radiologists throughout the country, as well as those people who wanted to become pediatric radiologists. So I've been on that committee for probably 15 years, and I chaired that committee for over a decade.
And what do the initials ACR stand for?
That stands for the American College of Radiology.
And do you have any involvement with that organization?
Yes, sir. I'm a fellow of the American College of Radiology.
And for us that don't know what that means, what is a fellow at something?
Well, in this case, about 10% of all radiologists will eventually become a fellow with the American College of Radiology. I've been a fellow for over a decade. The American College of Radiology's job is to set the guidelines across America of how to practice radiology. So they're very heavily involved in setting up indications, guidelines, and appropriateness, and how to do exams to keep patients safe.
What is the American Academy of Pediatrics?
That is the largest organization across the country for pediatricians to be members of.
And do you have any involvement with that group?
Yes, sir. I'm also a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Less than 1% of all radiologists will be a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and to be a member of that, I must be practicing the vast majority of my time in pediatrics only, and I've been involved as a fellow of that organization again for over a decade.
Have you ever presented or lectured for that group?
Yes, sir. I've presented pretty much at all these groups you just mentioned.
And have you presented specifically to this group on the issue of child abuse?
Yes, sir, I have.
Have you authored any papers or presented at meetings throughout your career?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the jury approximately how many papers you authored?
Abstracts and papers, probably about 150 by the time you add in all the presentations, locally, nationally, internationally, and exhibits and presentations at meetings, it's probably somewhere in the range of the upper 300s.
Have you been involved in writing any books that deal or discuss the issue of child abuse?
Yes, sir, I have.
And have you received any awards or achievement awards dealing specifically with the issue of child abuse?
Yes, sir, I have.
And what awards are those?
Well, I have received the CAFE award twice. The CAFE award is given to one pediatric radiologist each year based on a poster or presentation at the meeting. I won that award twice. One time that I won the award, it was specifically for misdiagnosis and controversies in child abuse as they relate to brain imaging. That award is named after John Caffey, who is the first person to popularize the idea that child abuse occurred back in the 70s, and so it's named in his honor. Similarly, the two textbooks that I've been involved with, one of them is Caffey's textbook of pediatric radiology, which is a 2-volume textbook. It is in its 13th edition, and it is also named in Dr. Caffey's honor, and it is a textbook that basically includes everything about pediatric radiology. And the other textbook I've been involved with is a pediatric orthopedic textbook. So it's for the surgeons that take care of children, and it is a 2-volume set, I believe, as well, and I wrote the chapter on fractures in child abuse.
Do you currently hold any academic appointments?
I'm the director for the radiology elective rotation for the departments of family medicine and internal medicine.
Judge, at this time I would tender Dr. Hutchison as an expert in the field of pediatric radiology.
Ms. Fox, any objection?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Bernard, any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Dr. Hutchison will be admitted for that purpose, as requested.
All right, Dr. Hutchison, as to this case, you have been asked to review some records and images related to a child by the name of Jamison Timms. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I have.
And can you tell the jury what records and what images you have reviewed in consultation of this case?
I reviewed all of the radiology imaging in the case from the 2 hospitals where the child was seen, I believe Erlanger and Children's Hospital of Atlanta.
And can you tell us a little bit about the process that you go through when you review images in a case of this nature?
Yes, sir. So what I do is I receive the images that if an attorney wants me to look at images, I ask them to send those to me with no information at all about the case. So I first do what's known as a blind review. So I look at the images not knowing anything about the child as much as I possibly can. I will review those images, contact the attorney, yourself, or one of your colleagues there, and then discuss with you what I see on the images. At that point, once I've given you my opinion, you can then tell me if you want me to do any further work on the case, such as review the medical record or not.
As to Jamison Timms, based upon your review of the images, why was imaging performed on Jamison?
Well, initially he received imaging because there were some skin changes concerning for bruises, and then on the follow-up, I believe there was also some concern for child abuse as related to an ulcer in the mouth, and again, I would not be examining the skin. That would not be part of my job duties, but that's my understanding from the review of the medical record, but concern for non-accidental injury. So then additional imaging was performed after that. The total imaging included skeletal survey, MRI brain, and a CT brain, and there were multiple skeletal surveys done.
And what were the findings that you reviewed on Jamison?
Well, he initially had imaging at Erlanger skeletal survey, which was normal. That was at 6 weeks of age, and then at 3 months of age, he was imaged at Children's Hospital of Atlanta, where he had 2 to 3 healing fractures in his left posterior ribs, and then there was some report of a compression fracture of the spine. So you actually answered what they reported. So what I saw on those imaging studies was I agree with Erlanger that the initial skeletal survey was normal, and then on the follow-up, I agree that there were 2 to 3 healing posterior rib fractures. I would not have called the thoracic compression fracture. To me, that was not sufficient to call, not without additional imaging, so I would have called that normal.
As to the posterior rib fractures, is one of the things that you do in your review an effort to what we would call date those fractures, or try to determine as best you can when they occurred?
Yes, sir, to the degree that that's possible, I try to do that.
Okay. And as to those rib fractures, have you formed an opinion as to when you think those fractures would have occurred?
Yes, sir, to the best of to the best that I can off of only X-rays.
Okay. And based upon the X-rays, and we'll talk about some other issues in a moment, but just based upon your review of the X-ray images, when, in your opinion, are those fractures likely to have occurred?
Well, they are in an advanced stage of healing, so I would think that they would be at least 2 to 3 weeks of age, probably older, and could be several weeks of age, up to 3 months.
And what do you base that on?
Based on the fact that they are in an advanced stage of healing, there are also publications that talk about the most likely time frame to see healing.
I object to any publications.
Hold on just a second.
I object to any publications. We were not allowed to do that. I'm going to continue to object if they try to do that.
Mr. Good, any response to that objection?
I'll direct her the question.
Okay, so at this moment in time, Dr. Hutchison, please don't refer to any publications or testify about those publications. And I want to just stop right here just 1 second, because I think we've had several pronunciations. If I could right here get you to spell your last name for the court reporter, please.
Yeah, a very good question, Your Honor. Most of the time it gets misspelled. There is no N in the middle of my name. It's Hutchison.
Okay.
Hutchison. I spell it, and people still call me Hutchinson, so.
Well, I had caught several pronunciations here in the courtroom, and I was guilty of that myself, so I just want to clarify. So thank you, Dr. Hutchison. Go ahead, Mr. Hood.
Okay, doctor, let me sort of rephrase my question. If testimony has been provided in this case by a pediatric radiologist that she would expect to see calluses formed on these healing rib fractures within 10 to 14 days, what would your response to that be?
My response would be, I agree with her. That is when you would begin to see callus. You would expect to start seeing it around 10 to 14 days, and then it will progress through a pattern of healing. And when you are in an advanced stage of healing, you're going to be well beyond that point, up to several weeks of age.
If these fractures were formed at birth, and this young man was born in October of 2021, and he presented at Erlanger Hospital in both November of 2021 and December of 2021, do you have an opinion as to why there was not evidence of those fractures on the images taken at Erlanger?
Well, whenever we look at fractures in the early stages, oftentimes there's no evidence of healing, and there is a range for when that healing can show up. It does not always show up in the first 7 to 10 days. It can actually take several weeks to first show up to 6 weeks, so it's possible there could have been a fracture there, but it just didn't show up.
Could there have been other imaging done relating to those fractures that may have been given a better idea, or you, or any reviewing radiologist, a better idea as to when they were formed?
Yes, sir. In a baby this young, it's often a great idea, and many people do this, which is to do a CAT scan a low-dose CAT scan to look at the bones in the child and get a better idea of what the fractures look like and what stage of healing they're in, so you could better date them.
And to your knowledge, was a low-dose CAT scan performed at either hospital in this case?
No, sir.
Related to the alleged compression fracture on the T10 vertebrae, I presume that you've had the chance to review images purportedly showing that compression fracture. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And your indication a few moments ago was that you would not call that a fracture. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the jury why you would not call that a fracture?
I would not have thought it was sufficient to call a fracture. I understand that they were concerned about it based on their language of suggestive of a fracture, and if I had had any concern at that time, we could have done additional testing to figure it out, but based on those x-rays, it would not have been sufficient to call.
In your experience, the phrase that was used repeatedly in the CHOA records dealing with that compression fracture, stating that it was suggestive of a fracture, is that a phrase that has any significance to you?
Well, I think the word suggestive inherently implies uncertainty. So whenever things are uncertain, especially if they might end up in a court of law where important decisions are going to be made, at least in my practice, I always will then raise the possible ways that we might figure it out. So it goes from suggestive to definitely one way or the other. In this case, what could have been done was an MRI, which is often done because if you have a fracture to your spine, oftentimes you will have a spinal cord injury or something wrong with that area. So generally speaking, it's not unusual to have an MRI, which would give you more detail about the soft tissue in the spinal cord. But also a thing that I have done multiple times in my career, even though honestly compression fractures are extremely rare in child abuse, but the 2 times that I do recall diagnosing it, we did a bone scan, which is a bit of an old-fashioned test, but works great in this situation to try to see if the bone is abnormal, and then we can prove it one way or the other.
All right. Based upon your review of the records and the images, was there either an MRI of T10 that was performed or a bone scan to get a better picture?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Okay. If, well, strike that. Based upon your review of the images, how would you have advised a pediatrician that day or that evening in terms of what needed to happen next with James?
Well, if I was talking to my pediatricians, I would tell them, as such a young baby, so close to the time of birth, we need to get more detail about the rib fractures to get better dating on those, because even though it could be rare, it is possible that it could overlap with the time of birth and may have not been seen on the initial skeletal survey. I would have also advised them to do follow-up imaging, which they did do, which showed that the rib fractures were completely healed, which means that that confirms they were in the later stage of healing when we did see them. As far as the compression fracture, I would have told them I'm very uncomfortable calling that a definite fracture, and I know that it may make a big difference, so I would suggest that we do an MRI, a bone scan, or both to try to figure that out, whatever it would take to figure that out.
All right, doctor, that's all that I have for you right now. A couple of the other attorneys will have some questions for you, okay?
Thank you,
Yes,
Mr.
sir,
Hood.
thank you.
Ms. Fox?
Thank you, doctor. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Ms. Fox, thank you, I can hear you fine.
Perfect. You indicated that you had reviewed all of the x-rays from Erlanger and CHOA. You've referenced the November 18th, 2021 scans that were done, and you agree that they were normal exams. You did not note any fractures on that exam.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you also receive the radiologist report from Nicholas Appleton regarding the November 18th, 2021 scan?
Yes, ma'am. To the best of my knowledge, I believe I did.
And he did not note fractured ribs either. He agrees with you, it is a normal exam.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you given the outside study that was done by Texas Children's Hospital, Dr. J. Kahn, in regards to the November 18, 2021 scan?
Are you talking about a whole nother skeletal survey that was done?
No, I'm talking about a second reading, a second opinion, so to speak, an outside study of the November 18th scan.
I understand there was an addendum dictated on that report at CHOA.
Now, this is a separate reading that was done by Texas Children's Hospital, so if it doesn't sound familiar to you, then you were not given that then.
It's possible I read the report and just didn't read where it came from, so if you wanted to refresh my memory, I may have looked at it, but I'm not certain.
That's okay, I will move on. When you called it a normal exam, you did not see any evidence of metabolic bone disease?
No, ma'am.
You did not see any flared ribs?
Not on the skeletal survey, no.
You did not see any cortical tunneling or retrotrabecular bone patterns in the bones or extremities?
Nothing that I saw that was gross, but mostly what I was focused on was looking for fractures and timing those fractures.
So the bottom line is it's a normal exam, no evidence of metabolic bone disease, certainly no rib fractures on November the 18th of 2021.
Yeah, I did not see any rib fractures or any other trauma on that initial scan.
Okay. Did you review the scan that was done on December the 8th of 2021 from Erlanger?
That was I believe, the last skeletal survey, would that be correct?
No, it would be the second, essentially the follow-up for Erlanger. They did the November 18th where they found it to be normal. And about 2 weeks later, on December the 8th of 2021, they did an entirely new set of scans, and that was read by Dr. J. Coleman, who's also a pediatric radiologist.
Yes, I did read that one.
Okay. And did you agree that there were no fractures on the December 8th, 2021 exam?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was consistent with what Dr. J. Coleman had noted?
I'm sorry, which one was Jay Coleman? I'm sorry about
He's the
Coleman.
pediatric radiologist who read the December 8th, 2021 exam for Erlanger on the follow-up from the November 18th visit.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, on the December 8th scans, you did not note any metabolic bone disease?
Again, I was looking for fractures and timing of those fractures, but I did not notice anything specifically that jumped out at me for metabolic bone disease.
So no flared ribs, no cortical tunneling, none of that?
I generally like to have a CAT scan of the chest in order to call flared ribs, so it's possible that was there, but I did not notice anything that was gross when I was looking for the fractures and timing those fractures.
In either the November 18, 2021 scan or December the 8th, 2021 exam, you did not see any wormian bones or things that would have been indicative of osteogenesis imperfecta?
I did not. There's generally always at least a couple wormian bones, even in normal people, but I didn't see anything excessive that would have been a definite sign of osteogenesis imperfecta.
Did you write a report in connection with your review of the Erlanger scans?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so everything that we have is just what you told the defense attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there a reason why you didn't write a report?
They did not ask me to.
Okay. Do you usually write reports when you review scans?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It just depends on what they ask me to do in each individual case.
Okay. On January 14th of 2022 would be the first of what we've been referring to as the CHOA scans, the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. You indicated that you did review those skeletal surveys. Isn't that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that you agree that there were 3 broken ribs, posterior 8, 9, and 10.
There was at least 9 and 10. 8 was a little bit iffy, but that could have been worked out with a chest CT, but there were definitely at least 2.
Okay. Were you given the outside study, that is the second opinion that was done from Texas Children's Hospital on the January 14, 2022 CHOA scans?
I do not know if I received that one or not. I know that I looked at the reports, but I'm not sure where they were from as I sit here today.
Would it surprise you that they also noted the 9th and 10th, and they also called the 8th subtle, but that they did in fact see the compression fracture of T10?
No, that wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. Now, you did take issue with the wording that it was a suggestion of a compression fracture, didn't you?
Well, people can say whatever words they want. I'm just saying I try not to use the word suggestive unless I'm gonna figure it out. If I say suggestive and imply any kind of uncertainty, I generally tell people how they might figure it out. So as a person who teaches and trains residents for over 15 years, I strongly discourage them to use words like suggestive, possible, suspicious, things like that. And I say, if you say a word like that, then please explain yourself in the report so that people aren't left wondering what you mean. So I would prefer people didn't use those kinds of words, but I understand people do it.
Okay. On the January 14th, 2022 scan, did you measure T10 at 6 millimeters?
I did not measure it.
Did you measure T10 on the November 18th, 2021 exam at 8 millimeters?
I did not measure that.
Wouldn't it have been a prudent thing to measure the comparison study from Erlanger to see the difference in height on the CHOA exam?
No, ma'am, I don't believe so. I think if you actually have a ruler and if you know what a millimeter looks like, it's like the size of a whole centimeter is like the width of my pinky nail. So if I'm gonna divide that into 10 pieces and make decisions based on that, I'd really rather have a better study like a CAT scan or an MRI or something to figure that out. I can change something a millimeter or two very easily when I'm measuring things. So I would not have done that. It's not my habit to measure the height of each individual vertebra, and I've never seen anybody do that before. So I would not have.
Did you receive Dr. Paula Dixon's February the 3rd, 22 report that actually called T10 a compression fracture?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was not qualifying language in any way, shape, or form?
The one that I received is where she said suggestive, and after that, she may have had said something different, I don't know.
So you did receive the February 3rd, 2022 written report where she called it a compression fracture, but you don't know whether you read it or not?
Yes, no, I did.
And she, in fact, called it a compression fracture?
Yes.
No wiggle room in that?
Yes, she initially called it suggestive, and then she called it a fracture, correct.
And then on the February 3rd, 22 written report, she shows that the ribs have in fact healed.
Yes.
You agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you given the report from the pediatric radiologist from the June 16th, 22 skeletal surveys that were done at CHOA?
June 16, I'm sorry, which year?
2022.
I do not believe I have received any additional ones other than the ones I initially received.
Okay. Did you review the x-rays and skeletal survey that was taken on June 16th of 2022?
I do not believe so. I only looked at the ones at the time where the child was injured.
Would you be surprised to know that at that point everything had healed, including what they had called a compression fracture?
Obviously everything had healed on the previous one, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was still healed, no ma'am.
Now, when he was seen, and that may be specific, when Jameson was seen on November the 18th of 2021, he was actually 5 weeks old there at Erlanger because his birthday's October the 8th, isn't that correct?
I would have to go back and look up his birthday, but I believe he was somewhere between 5 and 6 weeks, so that sounds correct.
Okay. And on none of the exams that you reviewed, did you know that there was any metabolic bone disease at all, including, and because I didn't mention it, including the January exams from CHOA?
I did not see gross changes of metabolic bone disease, but again, I was looking for the fractures mainly and trying to age them.
But as an experienced pediatric radiologist, if he had abnormalities on his February 2022 scans that showed metabolic bone disease, that's certainly something you would have noted and brought to the defense attorney's attention.
Yeah, if I had seen that, but generally metabolic bone disease takes much longer to show up in a child. You have to lose 20 to 30% of your bone density before anything will even show up. So I don't think metabolic bone disease ever shows up, in a very young baby like that. It takes probably 6 months, most of the time to show up. I mean, unless you're specifically looking for like fine details and that's your focus on your exam, I don't think you would have a lot of chance to see that. There would be a lot of findings that could show up more obviously later.
So if a witness has testified whose hobby it is to read skeletal surveys and they testified to metabolic bone disease, it's your professional opinion, it wouldn't even show up for the first 6 months of life?
No, I'm sorry if I misstated that. What I meant was to have lost your bone density to where it would become very easy and obvious for a person to see on the x-rays, when you would have to lose 20 to 30% of your bone density. But if you were going through the images, looking carefully for specific signs, you might be able to pick those up if that was your main focus on the exam.
Were you given the normal DEXA bone scan that Jameson had when he was 2?
Yes.
And that, you would agree that was a normal exam?
Yes.
Okay. You said, and I don't want to misquote you, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, that it would have been your preference that Jameson undergo a low-dose CAT scan when he presented at SHOA because you did not think the skeletal survey that was done was sufficient. Have I understood what you were saying correctly?
No, not quite. Close.
Okay. Where am I wrong?
Well, there's no requirement to do a CAT scan, but when you see rib fractures and it's a number of people, you know, it's not unusual to go ahead and scan those with a chest CT to be more accurate about the dating, to get a better look at those fractures. So especially when you have a child that's very young, it can be very helpful to try to date those fractures better, to be more accurate.
Would you not think it would be difficult to do a CAT scan or an MRI on an infant that is just a few months old because they're so wiggly and they're not going to lay still like an adult would?
No, it's quite easy. Babies pretty much sleep most of the day, or at least take consistent naps each day, so you just coordinate with the time of their nap.
Were you given information that at the time he was at CHOA, he was crying consistently?
No, but I'm sure he slept some point. I mean, he couldn't possibly cry for days on end. You just swaddle them, feed them, and put them in the CAT scanner, and if it doesn't work, if you can't get them to relax, you just send them upstairs or wait a few minutes and try again after another patient. So it's a routine for people to image babies without sedation, especially for something quick like a CAT scan. It only takes like 2 minutes to get it done.
Are you familiar with the American Academy of Pediatrics clinical report that's published each year?
I'm sorry, is that a publication?
It is.
A paper? Are we allowed to do that, Your Honor?
Well, I'm allowed to ask you this. I'm asking you right now if you're familiar with the American Academy of Pediatrics clinical report.
Okay,
Published on January 21st of 2025.
And hold up right there, just to clarify. So on direct examination, Mr. Hood was not allowed to ask about publications, but because Ms. Fox has you on cross-examination, she will be allowed to ask about publications, and then Ms. Bernard also will have you on cross, and she would be allowed if she had questions. So
And for the record, I have served this particular report on the defense.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify for the witness, so go ahead, Ms. Fox. Doctor, do you need her to repeat that question?
No, thank you for the
Okay.
clarification. I didn't understand exactly how that worked. I just didn't want to do anything I wasn't supposed to do.
I
Thank you.
understand. I understand.
The article is entitled "Evaluating Young Children with Fractures for Child Abuse as a Clinical Report." It was authored by Haney, Sherry, DeMeglio, Harris Rosello, Service, Merchant, the Council on Child Abuse and Neglect. There was a section on orthopedics, a section on radiology, a section on endocrinology, and the Society for Pediatric Radiology. Are you familiar with this particular article?
I think I have read that. I could not sit here and go over the details with you as I said, but I'm familiar.
Do you agree that these are respected authors in their fields?
Yes, ma'am.
In the article, it states fractures that are more concerning for abuse include fractures in a non-ambulatory child, fractures that are not consistent with the history provided, or for which no history or injury is given, and fractures that have a high or moderate specificity for abuse. Do you agree that would have been a statement out of that article?
It sounds like it would be. You're reading it and I will trust you on that.
Okay. Do you agree that when we have someone such as Jameson that's so young that he could not have injured himself, that you have to look at those cases more closely than you would a child who is mobile and able to move around?
Well, anytime a child presents with a fracture, especially a non-mobile child, they always get a child abuse workup. Whether in the end it ends up being abuse or not, they're always going to get a workup.
Were you aware that the authors were critical of false and fabricated, let me say it correctly, were you aware that the authors were critical of false and fabricated conditions such as temporary brittle bone disease?
Yes, I'm aware of there's a whole history behind that, and I'm aware of that, the body of literature that surrounds that.
And in fact, in this particular article, which was really several different professionals, including radiologists such as yourself coming together, they indicated in the article that blaming antacid use, transient copper deficiency, and such as that was a dishonest, unproven sham. Quote.
Okay, you're reading it, so I'm not going to, if you just want to read from it, I will skip, I'm not going to be able to repeat it because I'm sitting here in another city, so I can't.
You don't have it. But does it sound like what you read in January?
Yes, I'm aware there's a whole body of literature that surrounds all those things. I'm aware of it.
Okay. In addition to the article that I cited, you indicated that you are a member of the Society of Pediatric Radiology?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware that the Society of Pediatric Radiology has refuted that temporary brittle bone syndrome exists?
I am aware of that, yes.
Are you also aware that the Society of European Pediatric Radiology has thoroughly refuted that temporary brittle bone syndrome exists?
I'm aware of that.
You indicated that you were aware of situations where there were birth fractures.
Yes, ma'am.
Most common birth-related fracture is actually the clavicle, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
The clavicle would be kind of the area what we would typically, for non-doctors and non-radiologists, call like the collarbone area.
That's correct.
Okay. But I'm not going to sit here and suggest that rib fractures don't happen in births. But they're usually large infants, aren't they?
Rib fractures can happen in a multitude of sizes of infants in various situations, so I don't think it's only large infants, but I don't know that that's a all-inclusive statement, so.
Okay. Were you aware that Jameson only weighed little over 5 pounds?
Yes.
Okay. You would agree with me that in comparison to clavicle fractures, rib fractures would be very, very rare.
Compared to clavicles, yes, which are more common than all other birth-related fractures.
It's also, when it comes to rib fractures and birth-related injuries, they're usually mid-posterior, aren't they?
I'm sorry, did you say birth, or what did you say?
Birth-related rib fractures are usually mid-posterior, aren't they?
I don't know that there's actually, if there's a paper that talks specifically about birth-related rib fractures being mid-posterior, I would be interested in reading it. Because I know that I've seen, as a practicing radiologist, I've seen birth-related rib fractures in many locations, anterior and posterior.
Are you familiar with the article Debunking Fringe Beliefs in Child Abuse Imaging? It's an AJR expert panel narrative review.
Yes, ma'am.
It was authored by Corey Pfeiffer, Catherine Henry, Marguerite Kerr, Cindy Christian, Saba Service, Sarah Miller, and Peter Strauss. Are those all respected professionals in their field?
Yes, ma'am.
In their article, they talked about birth-related trauma as fringe belief number 5. Does that ring a bell?
I would have to go back and review it. I believe that paper's a little bit older, but I mean, again, you're reading it, so I would not dispute that.
You said you were familiar with the article. In the 3rd paragraph under this fringe belief, it says birth-related rib fractures are rare but have been documented. These typically are mid-posterior in location and most commonly occur in large infants who had difficult deliveries with complications. Does that sound about right?
That doesn't sound unreasonable, that sounds like a reasonable statement.
Well, I just asked you if the rib fractures would have been mid-posterior, and you said you didn't think there was any articles out there that said that. That's one that says that, isn't it?
That's what they're saying. I would have to go pull the reference that they're talking about, or see if they're just speaking from their own personal experience. I would have to see if that was if they had a reference article that talks about only rib fractures from birth, because they're so rare. I'd be surprised if there was one that exists with just that as the only topic. But now you've got me curious, so I'll probably go look at
Be important in this case because Jameson's location was actually posterior, not mid-posterior, correct?
Well, it was posterior. There's no real, like, specific line that you cut off that's exactly mid to posterior. Sometimes people refer to the fractures as posterior and mid, or they don't break it down that much. So again, I don't know that I can comment about those details, but his fractures were posterior.
Okay. The bottom line, in this particular case, you cannot exclude child abuse, can you?
You can never exclude child abuse from any child that comes in. 100% of them could be being abused.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Ms. Bernard, do you have questions of the witness?
I do, thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Hutchison.
Yeah, can just get your mic a little closer there.
All right, good afternoon, Dr. Hutchison. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's weird because I can hear the judge so much better than you on your mic. But okay.
Hold on one second, let me, help me out, just hold on one second.
I'm not touching anything. We know what happens.
Okay. And you got it down? Okay, try it.
How about now? Can you hear me, doctor?
I feel more like your voice is just echoing through some microphone somewhere in the courtroom rather than being your actual microphone. Because when you're close or far, it's about the same. Maybe tap it and see if it's working.
Your Honor, if it's a real issue, I'll be glad to close out my material and move to the side and give her my mic since it worked well.
Or I can use Mr. Hood's microphone, whatever.
Okay, or I was gonna say, or you can use that mic. Turn that mic this way if you don't mind. Let's try that, just a second. Hold on, just bear with us one moment. Now, what would that mic be? Okay, let's try this. Okay, if you'll push it this way towards her, now, try again.
Okay, how about now, doctor?
I think I'll be okay if you want to proceed. I'll let you know if there's
Okay.
any problem. I'll raise my hand as Your Honor advised.
All right, and good afternoon, Dr. Hutchison. I believe the last question that the state asked you was whether or not you could exclude child abuse in the case of Jamison Timms. What are the kinds of things that you look for when determining whether fractures are in fact a case of child abuse or non-accidental injury?
I mean, that's a really humongous question. That's like fractures from head to toe.
Well, I suppose, what would you tell your pediatricians if they were trying to figure out if this was abuse or something else?
I think, as I said before, I would have suggested that we get a better look at those fractures to date them better because they looked like they were very far advanced in the stage of healing. And that would have made me worried that perhaps we missed them previously when they were there, even though that would be unlikely, but it's still possible. And anytime we're possibly going to end up in court, which is like we are today, I would suggest that we get a better look at those with chest CT if possible to better date those. And then the question about the spine, if that was a question, then we could have figured that out with other imaging as well.
Given the fact that that additional imaging was not done in this case, is there anything else we can find about the results that we do have from Jamison that can tell you whether or not this was an inflicted injury?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but everything has to be correlated with the full clinical picture, like if he was a premature baby, if the mom had anything that she may have, any family issues, inherited issues, taking any medication, if there was abnormalities in the blood work. I mean, all that stuff would be taken into consideration. And looking at the ophthalmology exam to see if there are any bleeding in the eyes or any bleeding in the head, those all would be taken as things that would be going for or against, or as additional evidence that could potentially indicate inflicted versus accidental injury or possible other process going on with the bones, genetic workup, all those things.
And you did review the head CT scans that were done of Jamison in January of 2022, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And did they show any bleeding behind the brain or the eyes?
They did not show any bleeding, and the eye exam, we wouldn't see the bleeding in the eyes, generally speaking, with imaging very well unless it was really severe, but I know that there was an ophthalmology exam done at one point early on that was normal.
So would you expect that to be normal in the case of a child who had inflicted trauma?
It may or may not be normal. It's always good to check the eyes, because if they're abnormal, that is really, really strong evidence for child abuse if they're abnormal. So generally checking the eyes is part of the routine workup.
And in terms of clinical observations of Jamison when he was brought in in January of 2022, are there any signs that you would tell your pediatricians to look for when they were examining Jamison?
Well, my pediatricians generally know how to do a physical exam, so I don't really advise them on that. That's more of what they're going to be doing. I'm more helping them with working out what's happening on the x-rays and how that might relate to the patient.
Would you ever be able to see soft tissue damage on an x-ray?
You can occasionally, but it would be better seen with MRI, and obviously their physical exam is important for that. I'm not really going to be advising them on that.
Would you agree that Jamison scans do not show any evidence of soft tissue injury?
Yes, I would agree.
And you mentioned earlier that compression fractures are very rare, and particularly in infants, if I understood you correctly?
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about why you believe that to be the case?
Well, after 30 years, I've only seen a couple of compression fractures. Both of them were very subtle and required additional imaging to be certain.
And did they exist in conjunction with other injuries, or was it just the compression fracture?
No, they existed with other injuries.
Would there be any way for the amount of force necessary to cause a compression injury to be inflicted upon an infant of Jamison's age and not cause significant other injuries?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I think that's outside her scope as a radiologist. That would probably be better suited for a child abuse specialist.
And
Ms. Bernard.
And the witness has previously testified to her specialized training in child abuse. She's actually written chapters and textbooks on it. So if it is outside of her realm of specialization, then I think she can indicate that, but I don't think it is outside what she has been qualified for, Your Honor.
I would overrule the objection. I'll let her answer the question.
And again, based on your experience, training, and research, is that something that you would be able to determine or have an opinion on? Whether or not that compression fracture and the small rib fractures that you observed in the healing stage, whether that's something that could be caused without other injuries?
That was a really big question about a lot of stuff. I'm going to try to answer that. I guess the best answer is that nobody can really take babies and squeeze them and do serial x-rays and apply scientific pressures to their chest to see how much force it takes. We can't take babies and slam them down on their butts over and over and then see when we can see fractures, you know. So that's really an unanswerable question, but I can just tell you that rib fractures are commonly seen in babies with child abuse or accidental trauma, and compression fractures are rare. So that, especially the compression fractures, very rare, usually are seen in a setting where there are multiple other fractures in a very severe case of abuse, at least in the cases that I've seen.
Well, and Doctor, if we could talk a little bit about your specific experience in the field of child abuse. I believe you testified earlier in speaking with Mr. Hood that you had been involved in presenting specifically on the question of child abuse. Is that right?
If you're talking about my papers and presentations nationally and internationally, I have. But if you're talking about in court, I have testified on behalf of plaintiff the majority of the time in the criminal, family, and military court for the Air Force and the Army.
So, and how would you estimate the divide on when you are testifying for the prosecution versus when you are testifying for the defense?
The vast majority is for the prosecution.
So is it safe to say that there are many cases in which you have found evidence of non-accidental injury or inflicted child abuse?
Oh yes, yes, definitely.
And did you find those indications here in the case of Jamison Timms?
I found mostly healed rib fractures, and then there was a question of something in the spine that I did not think was sufficient to call. So in that situation, I would not have felt like that was adequate evidence to say that it was imaging-wise definitely child abuse, and I would have advised them to continue to work that up and see if they could get more information so that we could make a more definite decision.
And if you had found evidence suggesting that this was inflicted or non-accidental trauma on Jamison, would that have been the medical opinion that you offered?
Yeah, absolutely. I look objectively at the imaging findings.
And you are being paid hourly by the Timms family for your services in this case, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Anytime I'm in court, whether it's on behalf of the plaintiff, and if I've actually read the imaging, I just take a day off work, I'm still being paid to be at work, but I would be in court, and in a situation like this where I'm on a vacation day, then I may be paid by an outside source. So I'm not, in my regular, for many years, like, if I'm working in a hospital where I'm an employee, they just say go to court instead of coming to work today. But either way, I'm getting paid, whereas in this situation, I'm on vacation, so I am getting paid by the plaintiff. Or, yes, the family.
But just to be clear, you are offering your honest medical opinion and based on your professional review of the facts that have been presented to you, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately how many times have you testified on these kinds of issues in court?
Over 30 years, it's really hard to be sure. I'm sorry, I couldn't really tell you for sure because, most of the time things don't go to court, but, and so I've talked to attorneys and on both sides and law enforcement many times that it didn't even go to court. So, but as far as going to court, it's hard to be sure. It could be like 20. I don't know. I'd have to go, I'm not sure.
And so have you observed or learned about through your research any connections between medications taken by the mother during pregnancy and the likelihood of fractures or issues in young infants?
I'm aware that there are some medications that may have issues related to bone health, but I do not think I would be the person who would be qualified to testify on that any further.
Certainly. And in the course of your practice, have you ever made any other observations regarding connections between the circumstances of pregnancy and birth and the likelihood of bone fragility or early in life fractures?
I'm not sure really how to answer that question, except that when you're looking at a child that's very young and very close to the time of birth, birth injury would also be something you would always include in your differential, and then you would just weigh the possible differential diagnoses. But you wouldn't look at birth injury in a 2-year-old, for example.
But you would in a 5 to 6 week old or a 3-month-old?
Yes, that would be, I think that, up to 3 months, you would definitely want to consider possibility of a birth issue.
And from what you have observed regarding the stage of Jamison's healing fractures, you cannot exclude birth injury as a cause of those healing rib fractures.
I cannot, no, not with 100% certainty, I cannot.
Would the physical size of the mother delivering the child have anything to do with the likelihood of birth-related fractures?
I don't think I'm really qualified. I don't think that I know any specific answer to that question. I'm not really involved with the deliveries of babies personally. I'm aware there's some literature on that, but I couldn't quote that or answer that specifically.
Are you familiar with medical literature relating to the Swedish fracture registry?
I'm aware that there is a fracture registry of about 1.8 million babies that have had birth-related fractures from Sweden. I'm aware of that, yes.
And have you had occasion to review any of that literature?
Your Honor, I'm going to object if I haven't been served the literature she's referring to.
Let me let her finish your question. Let's see if you've been served with the literature.
And I was not referring to any particular piece of literature. The Swedish Fracture Registry is a research function that has been undertaken by a group of doctors. And so I'm merely asking for her familiarity with it and whether it has informed her own research and conclusions.
I'll let her ask that question. Go ahead.
And have there been any conclusions that you have drawn in your own research or conclusions from that database of 1.8 million infants with fractures?
Well, my job as a pediatric radiologist and also as a physician is to pay attention to literature as it's accumulated throughout my career. So as that is part of the general body of literature, I'm aware of that study, and it has confirmed many of the things we already knew about which fractures were most common, but it has also raised a lot of questions about diagnosing rib fractures as they relate to child abuse in very young infants who are close to the time of birth.
Would it be fair to say that one of those questions raised is whether or not rib fractures are misdiagnosed as child abuse in very young infants?
That is one of the issues that they have raised in multiple papers out of that part of the world, that they're concerned about an overdiagnosis of child abuse in very young infants.
And were there any aspects of Jamison's case that made you concerned about the possibility of misdiagnosis of non-accidental injury?
Well, my goal is to get my pediatricians to a point where they are as certain as they can possibly be about every case. And so in that regard, when I see a healing fracture that's well advanced and possibly could be related to birth, that's why I would suggest additional imaging. The same thing with compression fracture that looks really subtle or suggestive. I would then suggest more imaging, because it's really important for us to do everything we can possibly do at the time of the initial presentation to be 100% certain, so that we don't have to wonder which, if we did everything, we didn't know. So my goal as the assisting radiologist is to get them to the most certain point that they can be at based on the imaging. So that's my goal.
And you don't believe that based on the imaging that was done on Jamison, that you or your pediatricians would be in a place to make any diagnosis with certainty about the source of those fractures?
Your Honor, that was a compound question. I'm going to object to what her pediatricians would do. That's speculation as to them. She can certainly answer as to what she would do.
I'll let you rephrase the question, Ms. Bernard. I'll sustain the objection.
Certainly. So, do you believe that the imaging and testing that was done on Jamison Timms was adequate to support a conclusion of non-accidental injury?
I don't, I would not feel comfortable, and then with that, I would have recommended additional imaging to get to that point.
And did you find any evidence of swelling or other bone damage on any of Jamison's scans other than what we have already talked about?
I think we've talked about everything, all my opinions.
And so are there any limitations on your opinion that you have offered to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury today?
Not that I can, not on my opinions, no.
Okay. And what is your role in this case? Are you an advocate for a particular side?
I know, I do a blind review and I give the attorney what I see on the images. Honestly, a lot of times I don't even know if the person has called me a plaintiff for defense. I don't even want to know, frankly, because I think of myself like an umpire at a baseball game. There's two teams playing, but I'm not on either team, so I'm just going to give them what I see on the images, and they may or may not find that useful.
Okay. Would there be any treatment available for an infant with fractured ribs or a compression fracture?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
Would there be any treatment available for a child with?
Normally rib fractures are never treated. If there's a compression fracture, sometimes they have to put the baby in a cast or a splint or something. But because oftentimes people with fractures in their spine are generally symptomatic. But I'm not a pediatric orthopedic surgeon who treats babies with fractures, so I would probably defer anything further to somebody else.
Well, if I could just ask you, when you say normally a compression fracture would be symptomatic, what do you mean by that?
Well, a fracture in your spine is pretty severe. Usually it's from a significant trauma, which is why we usually end up doing an MRI and things like that to look at it more carefully. But and this is such a rare thing in babies. And since I'm not actually seeing the babies, I couldn't tell you what their symptoms are. So, but generally speaking, I guess maybe that doesn't make sense that I said that, because if you're an adult, you can say, hey, my back hurts, but babies can't do that. So, maybe symptomatic from the perspective of having touching them there and it hurts, or they cry. But again, I'm not examining the babies, so probably stay away from saying anything further on that.
But if I understood you correctly, you would expect that if there was an actual compression fracture, that there would at the least be pain and sensitivity?
Again, I'm going to defer any answers on the symptoms to people who can treat those babies.
And did you give a lecture at the American Academy of Pediatrics on the pitfalls of neuroimaging of child abuse cases?
I hope you're reading from my CV, because I think I did, but I have to pull it up and look at it to be certain what the topic was.
Well, I was wondering if you recalled any of those pitfalls specifically.
Well, those would mostly relate to the brain, so they wouldn't really be relevant in this case. That specific lecture you asked me about was brain stuff.
But you did review the head CT scans that were performed on Jamison in January of 2022, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you did not note any irregularities or anything that would suggest that there was an injury inflicted on the child?
There was no evidence of head injury, no.
Thank you very much. I believe those are all of my questions. Unless there was anything else that you noticed in your review of Jamison Tim's case that we have not explored yet.
No, ma'am.
Thank you very much for your perspective, Dr. Hutchison.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard.
Mr. Hood, any questions of redirect on this witness?
I have one question, doctor. You've been practicing medicine now for how many years?
About 30.
Are orthopedic surgeons qualified to read and interpret X-ray images?
Well, they are not radiologists, meaning that's not what they went to school for, but they certainly look at an x-ray like with just about every patient they see. So they definitely spend a lot of time looking at x-rays, and I know that it is part of their training, but I couldn't answer specifically regarding the training of orthopedic surgeons, as I've been a program director for radiologists, but not for orthopedic surgeons.
Let me ask it another way. Is it a common practice in your experience for orthopedic surgeons to read and interpret x-ray images?
Yes, it's very common. In fact, a lot of times they just read their own images and don't even ask us to read them. So that is one specialty that does a lot of their own interpretation.
It's not a hobby, is it?
Well, I guess I would imagine they're billing for it, so it's part of their practice as far as I know.
Thank you.
But you can ask them about that. I don't know, because once you bill for it, you're taking the medical legal risk, putting out a report, and you will be held responsible for that report later. So if they're doing it as part of their practice and billing for it, they're taking that medical legal risk just like I would.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fox, any other questions of this witness?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Bernard, any other questions?
I guess just one, you mentioned the medical and legal risk of attaching your name as a board certified and licensed surgeon to any opinion that you are offering, right?
Well, if you put out a report and bill, insurance and Medicare or whoever, then you are taking that medical legal risk. That's part of what we do.
Might that be a factor in when a particular doctor wants to swear to having made a specific diagnosis?
Well, in court, we're often talking about other people's reports, but I was just talking about in your daily practice, all day long, I read thousands of x-rays every year, and I take that legal risk thousands of times over, and sometimes, an orthopedic surgeon might do the same thing. Instead of having me read it, because they feel qualified to do it themselves, they just bill for it themselves. So if they're doing that, then they are taking the medical legal risk the same as I would. That was my attempt to explain that.
And you are confident in the opinion that you have offered as an expert here, which is, and then let me make sure that I get it correct, that there was not enough imaging done for you to agree with any diagnosis of non-accidental injury for Jamison Timms, correct?
I would be concerned that we could have done more to figure that out with a higher level of confidence and accuracy.
And that you did not see any other signs of child abuse, such as the brain or eye conditions that might commonly be associated with inflicting force upon a tiny child.
Correct.
Thank you very much, doctor. No further questions.
Anything else? Mr. Good? Ms. Fox?
Based on Ms. Bernard's questions, I do have an additional one. Dr. Hutchison, the way that Ms. Bernard phrased the question, I'm not limiting it just to the x-rays. If you had hypothetically additional information, the child had a tear very close to the frontal limb in his mouth. He had a, what almost was like a carpet burn size scratch on his cheek, on the fleshy part of his cheek. You would look at the other evidence before you make a call as to whether or not it is child abuse. You wouldn't look at the x-rays alone, isn't that correct?
My job as a radiologist actually would just to look only at the x-rays and then provide that information to the pediatricians who would be doing the physical exam. So I wouldn't be making comments about the skin or the inside of the mouth.
So you can't sit here today and say the child was not abused because you don't have all the facts that you would need to make that determination, isn't that correct?
My job is to say whether I think it's abuse based on the x-ray findings, and that's what I'm here to testify about today.
And you're allowed to say that, but you've got to answer my question yes or no first. And my question is, you do not have all the information that I've just stated one way or the other to make a determination as to whether or not there was child abuse in this case.
And Your Honor, I will interpose an objection at this point since the prosecutor has misstated the evidence that was available at CHOA regarding the alleged frenulum tear. Of course, the medical records reflect that the frenulum was intact and the child abuse pediatrician declined to take a photograph of this alleged injury.
Your Honor, I have not stated, could I please just correct? I said it was a tear under the tongue near the frenulum. That is what the medical evidence was.
Well, let me say this, and as to the two attorneys that are discussing it, the witness has already stated that, and these are my words, not the witness's words, the witness has stated that her area of expertise was in reading the x-rays and that she would not be qualified nor comfortable in offering opinion on the skin or other matters, so I think she's already answered that question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything else of this witness? Ms. Fox?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Bernard?
No, Your Honor. Thank you for your time, Dr. Hutchison.
And with that announcement, that would conclude this Zoom appearance today. Thank you for joining us by Zoom today, Doctor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Have a good day.
You too.